Today we'll talk about the middle section of Macbeth, and my part is about the relationships happening in it. And the main relationship is between Lady Macbeth and Macbeth. The part we've got is just after the killing scene, which I think just before this was the strongest part of the relationship. But after the killing scene, they both feel the guilt, and they start drifting away from each other, and they just start like leaving each other out and ignoring each other. Lady Macbeth says a quote that any water can wash this guilt away from my hands. But Macbeth says all the water in Neptune's ocean can't wash away the guilt from his hands, which is implying that Lady Macbeth has got over it already. She doesn't feel any guilt or anything, but Macbeth feels kind of it's getting on his mind all the time and it's getting the better of him, and because of this they both start hallucinating and just drifting away from each other really. In the banquet scene, which is straight after, Macbeth kind of leaves Lady Macbeth out and just leaves her on her own. He's always ignoring her, he's not including her in like the big conversations that are happening at the table, and the relationship just really goes downhill from there, and the hallucinations get worse, and at the end she kills herself.
Noting points from the second third of the play relating to structure are that the relationship between Lady Macbeth and Macbeth declines during this point. Although it does hit a high point during this section, it eventually hit a low point, when they are both overridden with guilt over the killing of Duncan and Banquo. The writer shows this using structure by using different sections of the play to show different stages in the relationship, and also by showing the correlation between the behaviour of both of them to show how strong the relationship is. Not only does the structure show how the relationship changes, but how their mental state changes, depending on the situations. Shakespeare portrays this by using structure, by including things which reoccur later on in the play. An example of this is when Lady Macbeth and Macbeth are holding hands and are very close, but later on they have their hands outreached but not touching. This is a very strong message about how not only their relationship but their mental state has changed, as there is a mental barrier stopping them from holding hands, and that is their guilt after killing Duncan and Banquo. The structure plays an important part in how the play is told and how messages get across to the audience. The play is structured in a way where the audience can really see what's happening in the play. It's set out so you can see what each character as events unfold and how they react depending upon them. This means that the structure plays a vital part in the play, how the play is planned out and delivered, making it one of the key factors in the play. To summarise in a tweet, the structure in Macbeth is very important to how the play turns out. It helps to show how characters' relationship and behaviour changes.
My part is the context. When the play Macbeth was written in the 17th century, to kill a king was far worse than to kill a person. It would have been the most extreme case of murder, as kings were seen as an object of God. This had a massive psychological effect on Macbeth, as we see him lose his mind throughout the play to try and keep his power and feel almighty like a god. Act 3, Scene 4, the banquet scene, is a dramatic representation of Macbeth's isolation. As Florence has escaped from being murdered, Macbeth feels trapped by the situation he finds himself in. He feels cabin, crypt and confined. He is afraid he may not keep his power forever. Also, Macbeth imagines he sees Banquo's ghost sitting in his seat at the banquet. The fact that Macbeth sees no space for him at his own table symbolises his isolation and that he feels threatened of someone taking his power as king. Macbeth continues to degenerate at the banquet as his suspicions turn to Macduff, who had insulted him by not attending. This shows Macbeth is paranoid that someone is trying to take the throne off of him. The end of Scene 4 is a turning point for Macbeth, as he realises he cannot undo what he has done. He decides to continue with his attempts to eliminate all those whose existence threaten his position. Macbeth describes this as, "I am in blood so far that, should I wait no more, returning were so tedious." Previously, Macbeth had showed that he had a moral sense, but from this point onwards, he deliberately suppresses his conscience. For my own good, all should give way. From this, he decides to seek out the witches and demand that they reveal more about the future for him.
So I'll be focusing on the language of the middle third of Macbeth and summarise it in a tweet. It can give an insight into a character's head. It can be used to determine relationships between people or who they are speaking to. First of all, I'd like to point out that a lot of people think of language as verbal, but there is also body language, which in some aspects can be just as powerful and useful as verbal language. There's a moment before the feast where Macbeth and Lady Macbeth are together. He's clearly overwhelmed by what's going on because he sits in a chair, rubbing his face, while Lady Macbeth questions him on why he feels guilty and says, "What's done is done," although he says that they have scorched the snake, not killed it. So he's comparing the idea of monarchy as a snake, which is supported by the fact he compares her tooth to power. It is important to note that language can be total opposites to what a character is thinking. The two agree on seeming to be fine and jovial for the feast with their generals, but they both know at heart that they are anything but. Metaphors are extremely good techniques of using what seems like inappropriate language, but making it relate to the current situation. Macbeth describes his mind as being full of scorpions, which we know can't be totally true, but it's a good way to describe the thoughts whizzing around his head, almost hurting him. By the end of his scene, you can see by the expressions on their face that they are feeling almost weak and emotional, and end the scene on hugging each other, showing that they still love one another. The next time Lady Macbeth and Macbeth are together are during a meeting with the generals. At this point they are, like they discussed earlier, looking and sounding jovial. Although after Macbeth's meeting with the murderer he is less so, and it is apparent to Lady Macbeth by the cold look on her face as he stands by the table. After the ghost of Banquo appears in his seat, he begins to go into a fit again, but Lady Macbeth tries to convince the generals that these fits are of a regular occurrence, since his youth, and that it's momentary. When they begin to talk to each other, the mood changes. She begins verbally assaulting him, asking if he is a man, basically calling him a wimp, and saying that this vision is one of fear provoking him. Though she continues to basically say what they have been getting up to, the dagger which led you to Duncan, and saying that the vision of the dagger is just like this one, fear provoked. With the Liverpool Everyman production, once she says that, one of the generals turns his head, possibly meaning that these generals in the room realise they were the ones to kill Duncan. Body language can also be good to use to help understand who a conversation is being made with, i.e. finger pointing, as Macbeth does with Banquo's ghosts. Comparisons are a technique which can be found throughout the play, but one example would be as Banquo's ghost appears, Macbeth compares him as being worse than 3 dangerous animals. Macbeth drops to his knees after seeing Banquo's ghost, showing that there's weakness behind this, what is thought of as powerful king. But when Lady Macbeth moves over to comfort him, he pushes her away. Perhaps the relationship is not as sound as once thought. This too is supported by the fact he blames this happenings on his wife, saying, "You make me strange, even to the disposition that I owe." Basically translating as, "You make me feel as if I'm not myself." Finally, we must acknowledge the fact that a sentence can be varied depending on how it's said, also known as using paralinguistics. With the blood will have blood quote, Macbeth says it with such an intensity and fierceness, both in his voice and as an expression on his face, that as an audience we know it's symbolic.
I'll be focusing on the form part of the play. Macbeth and Lady Macbeth have it all at this part of the play. Once Macbeth finds out Banquo is dead, they both feel guilty. That was sweet. Firstly, I want to point out that the form is the way that it is set out on stage to give the play a good effect. And I think that form can be just as powerful as language, context, etc. So now we're talking about basically the climax of the play, where both Lady Macbeth and Macbeth have killed the king and both seize power of Scotland. The form of this part of the play is very dark and full of guilt, but they also feel powerful at the same time. And the darkness of this section of the play adds to the severity of Macbeth and Lady Macbeth's relationship falling apart.